Today we're going to talk about a company called Oramed Pharmaceuticals, and this slide says to avoid Oramed stock, and we're going to tell you why that is. So to understand the value proposition, we need to talk about the global insulin market, which is pegged at around $20 billion. You may have seen discussions in United States Congress about how expensive insulin is compared to what it costs to make, and those accusations are largely directed at the three companies that control over 90% of the global insulin market. That's Novo Nordisk, Sanofi, and Eli Lilly. So for many years, Novo has been trying to develop an oral insulin formulation, so that would be a pill that diabetics can take instead of having to inject themselves with insulin. It's been considered the holy grail of insulin delivery. Well, several years back, after spending billions of dollars trying to develop various methods of administering insulin that don't involve injections, they went with this diabetes medication that you can see advertised all over U.S. television right now, Rybelsus, and that bagged an FDA green light in September of 2019, and now they're peddling that to the masses. They're also working on seeking FDA approval for their once-a-week insulin shot, which has passed phase 3 trials. And of course, you have Eli Lilly with a similar product, which is currently in phase 3 trials as well. So, companies like Novo have been working on trying to solve these problems for a while, and here's an example from back in 2007 when they were working on an inhaler for insulin, and that cost them $2.8 billion to develop. It was said at the time to be one of the costliest failures ever for the drug industry, and they pulled that from the market because it didn't sell. For whatever reason, doctors weren't convinced of the long-term safety, but that didn't fly. So the value proposition from Oramed is largely that they've developed a oral formulation for insulin, and the impediment to doing that has always been that insulin breaks down in the stomach. So you'd have to put an awful lot of insulin in a pill so that the patient could receive enough because so much of it breaks down. And the story of Oramed starts back in 2006 when they used a shell company, as many firms do, to become publicly traded. And they went from mineral exploration, which the shell was doing before, to doing pharmaceuticals. So for those of you that are unaware, this is a common way for firms to become publicly traded that's quite easy. And most of the firms that do this we view with a great deal of suspicion. We'll talk about why that is. So the CEO of the company, strangely enough, his mother developed their technology. She happens to be the chief scientific officer. That's a huge conflict of interest. They shouldn't have made that arrangement because there's nothing endearing about it. It's just a problem when you have family members that work together. And when we started looking at this company, it immediately became clear that they've been spinning wheels for a while now and have accomplished very little. Mainly what they've been doing are clinical trials and more clinical trials. So I'll give you an example here. Back in 2017, they talked about how they were meeting with the FDA and that they were advised the regulatory pathway for their lead candidate, which is ORMD 0801, would be a biologics license application. So that's the path that they need to take. Well, that same year, they initiated 3 different studies. You can see here, for whatever reasons. They didn't submit to the BLA. They simply started doing more clinical trials. Well, fast forward to an article earlier this year, and look at what they say here. We are targeting the end of next year, that would be next year, 2023, to file a BLA application. What have they been doing for the last 5 years? And here's an update. The company expects to complete enrollment for its oral insulin NASH trial. Well, look, that was mentioned 5 years ago as well. So we got the impression right away that this was a company that mainly just talked about all the trials that they're doing without any sort of concrete plan towards commercialization, and the plot thickens. So this is a presentation that we found from 2014. And by the way, there's a research piece that accompanies this. I'll put a link to it in the description of the video, and it links to a number of critical pieces written by journalists about this company, which you can read for yourselves. We didn't utilize that for this presentation. We simply went and did our own research, and one of the things we came across is this reference towards a firm called Aegis Capital Corp and an analyst that works there, and I'm not going to try to butcher his name, but he was covering this firm back in 2014. And in 2015, you can see here how Aegis Capital Corp was fined close to $1 million by FINRA for selling unregistered penny stocks and failing to supervise its securities business. As recent as this year, they've been in trouble again, and in this case, they were selling highly complex variable interest rate structured products to 48 retail customers that they shouldn't have been doing. And you can read these court cases for yourself. Now, regarding that particular analyst, you can see here that he's listed as chairman of the board of directors for this firm, Relief Therapeutics. They're currently being sued by another pharmaceutical company, and you can read the accusations for yourselves. They're quite serious. And here you can see his track record where he used to work at Aegis Capital. Here's the lawsuit that alleges a pattern of collusion by this individual and members of Relief's management team and associates, it says, that have led to criminal investigations, sanctions, fines, and in one case, incarceration, and they're suing for $185 million. Here's one of the articles we came across back in 2014 that talks about how this firm keeps talking about the same safety trials over and over and over again, and that that's better than saying it's unsafe, but it's not the same as saying it works. And here's another article that's critical of the studies, in particular one study that had a positive outcome of a small and short 1-week phase 2A study. So when we did some investigation on this particular analyst, you can see here that he's also involved with research reports around another company here that it does something similar. It says converts the existing active pharmaceutical ingredients of well-known injectable drugs into pill form. That certainly sounds a lot like what Oramed is doing, but look at this, is perhaps the most telling. Here's the same individual in July of this year talking about, working for a different firm, as you can see, talking about Oramed Pharmaceuticals and the price target of $32. And again, we see a huge red flag here, and let's talk a little bit about some of these red flags. So we took this verbatim from a recent piece we did on the dangers of penny stocks, and I'll put a link to that research piece in the description of this video. And let's just go through a few of these real quick. So they're founded through a reverse merger of a shell. They have a patent or small number of patents, technology that someone in senior management whose credentials and past successes are heavily touted. Revenues are always around the corner. It says oftentimes you'll see grant income listed as revenue. Well, they certainly have grants. I'm not sure if they listed those as revenue back when they received them. And the reason that we covered this firm is because we kept being addressed on YouTube by a number of individuals who couldn't stop name dropping the firm, and that's very suspicious. Why they're so interested in getting that name out there. So we took a look, and now we know why. This company, they don't announce partnerships and memorandums of understanding. Instead, they have their clinical trials. They're paying investor relations firms for coverage. You can see that as far back as 2014. They don't have promises that were consistently broken because they don't provide any sort of milestones. But what will end up happening is that nothing will ever transpire, and that eventually investors will be left with shares that are largely worthless. And of course, constructive criticism of the company will be met with accusations of short selling, and we won't be surprised to see those show up in the comments section of this video. So just to conclude, this company is waving more red flags than Beijing Square. And when you see red flags like the ones that we've pointed out today that are so obvious and so blatant, you run away very quickly. There are many quality companies out there that are trading at a discount, and Oramed isn't one of them. So please leave your comments in the comment section. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for taking the time to watch this today.